Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Harrison, and I'm the editor of the extremely funny Just Try One Bite, which we're here today to talk about. And I'm so happy to be here with Camila Alves McConaughey right by my side, and our co author, Adam Mansbach, is joining us from across the country in California. So thank you so much for coming. We're so happy to be here.
Yes, we are happy to be here. We wish you were here with us, Adam.
No, me too. You guys look like you're having so much fun over there.
I know, you're so far. Well, I would love to just start with Camilla. This is your very first debut book, and I would love to hear just a little bit about yourself and about how you decided to do this book.
Absolutely. If anybody came to me a few years ago and said you would have a children's book, I would be like, you are out of your mind. That's just not happening. But really, I have this deep passion with having three kids, doing business that involved doing better for you on the children world. I've just had this moment of like, doing products is great, but the reality is if the education is not happening at home, if it's not a bigger conversation happening at home, then the kids and parents are not really going for it, right? And sorry, guys, I just saw Texas on the screen and I got distracted. Hello, Darlene Hill from Corpus Christi, Texas. Sorry. um, but I was talking to, Adam and I share we're under the same umbrella of management, and I was talking to somebody in there, and I was like, look, I just want to really. I was talking to my agent actually, Mark, at first, and I was like, I just want to really do something that I can continue the conversation about kids and the importance of, how food influences them, their bodies, what's good, what's not, how to create the balance, just in a fun, funny way without being preachy, to really encourage those conversations. And this idea of a kids book popped up, and I was like, well, that sounds fun. It sounds something that would really carry a long way with what I'm trying to do. So then they introduced me to Adam, and then the rest is history.
Yes. Well, that is a good lead in to introducing Adam. So, this is not Adam's first rodeo. He is a New York Times best-selling author. And it was actually Adam's idea to do this book in the perspective of the kids schooling the parents about what they should or shouldn't be eating. So, Adam, tell us a little bit more about how you came up with this idea.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I share a few things with Camilla. One of them is having three kids, and with you too, obviously, Kate. This is something to be involved in this book at all. The barrier for entry is three children. So
yes, it was in the contract.
It's in the contract. So yeah, I mean, and I also, of course, share an interest in figuring out how to get my kids and kids in general, not just to eat well, but to think well about food and sort of, we live in a culture where there's sort of danger for kids on all sides, right? There's all kinds of issues around the health and the appearance of our bodies, and it's very treacherous. My oldest kid is about to be 14, so I'm very cognizant of all of the pitfalls and traps. My youngest is 3, so I've got a bit of an age spread. And it seemed to me that the way that we could talk about food and about healthy eating and healthy choice making and add some levity and some humor to it and make it digestible, no pun intended, for kids, make it attractive to kids, it was going to have to involve humor, right? No kid wants to hear a lecture. As Camilla said, we didn't want to be preachy. So the thought came to mind, something I sort of do often with my own kids, is play around with this kind of role reversal and power reversal. And I think anytime you put kids in that position of power, there's a lot of fun to be had. There's a lot of jokes to be made, and something shifts in their perspective. So the idea of a book where kids got to cajole and bribe and threaten and convince their parents to eat better just opened up a lot of possibilities and allowed us to make the book funny and ridiculous and sort of unlocked a lot of the fun and made it a lot of fun for me to take on. As it's funny, I never think of myself primarily as a poet, but I mean, when you're writing rhyming stanzas, I guess there's no other word for it. So, it's a lot of fun for me. I mean, this book from start to finish has been super fun. Working with Camila's been great. We ended up with a fantastic illustrator whose work is so central to the book. And when I think about the verses now, I can't help but picture Mike Bolt's illustrations in my head, which, is the highest praise you can give. I think for the writer to be unable to imagine the work without the illustration says a lot.
It's so true. It's so true.
Yeah. So speaking of Mike Bolt, that's a good lead in. He also has 3 kids, also in the contract. It was meant to be that this book had to have 3 kids in the illustrations. I would love to just hear a little bit from both of you, because I know we talked through a lot of illustrator options. This was a very big conversation. And I know that from the start, you both just loved Mike's illustrations. And I would love to hear a little bit more from each of you just about what was it about his work that made you think he was the one?
You go, Adam.
Sure. I think the way maybe we'll, we can
good idea.
show the people what we're talking about. I mean, Mike, I think what we were both looking for was just a certain level of expressiveness, right? Like we wanted people with faces that told a story. We wanted somebody who could create characters who felt sort of rich, a simple style, but also one that contained a lot of emotion and a lot of nuance. And I was familiar with Mike's work already because he illustrated a book that was getting a lot of run in my house. I'm trying to remember the title. It's about a frog who wants to be bigger. That's as close as I can come.
Said, I want to be a frog. I
don't remember the name.
So like I loved his work from that book, and I'm not gonna lie, there are a lot of books that my kids bring me and are like, read me this book, and I'm like, no. I read you that book once, and I never want to read it to you again. It falls into the other category of books where I'm like, bring it on. I'll read this anytime, So yeah, I think we both just kind of gravitated to his work. I don't know. I'd love to hear what Camila thinks too.
Yeah, no, it's very similar to what you're saying. I think that, to your point, it was a really big conversation. And when you do a book, and look, for me being the first time, I'm like, okay, let me learn all about it. How does this work? I drove Kate crazy.
Not at all.
Like crazy, because I would have 1,000 questions and this and that, but it was so, like, it's a fundamental thing to get the illustration right, to partner with the right people, the right artists for this, to make sure that it is bringing, you go through all this work to get the words right, the rhymes right, everything's rhyming, and you got to rap. I remember Adam, like, you're reading it to me as a rap on the phone, and it's like, okay. And so then, like, it's, the thing that it really spoke to me with his work, it's how his characters really felt alive. Like they all had this, you felt like they were right there with you. Like, even the cat that he does, the cat and all, like, you feel like, oh, I know this cat. Like, if you don't have one like that with that personality, all his characters have personality to it that come out of the book, right? And I think he did just that with the book, really, guys. The fact that when you're reading the book, and somebody said this to me the other day, and I was like, you know what? You're so right. Somebody told me, listen, when you read the book, you feel like you're right there at the dinner table with the family. You feel like you're right there with the kids when they go, in your face, mom and dad. Like, you feel that energy, right? And it's really his work bringing all of that to life.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And going back to your kids again, I would love to talk a little bit about, this was a true family effort, this book. you had two of your kids and one of Adam's kids did the audio narration for this book, which I have to say is my favorite picture book audio of all time. And I'm not just saying that. It's amazing. Everyone should listen to it. But I would love to hear a little bit more just about what your kids thought of doing that audio and what they have responded to most strongly in the story.
Yeah, look, for me, I remember us having the conversation, like, right, you guys are like, oh, Camila, can you do the audio? And I stopped for a second because I was like, okay, I could do it, but with my Portuguese, English, the accents are going to be in there. It'll be flavorful, it'll be fun. But then I was like, really, who should be doing this? It's the kids, because it's the voice of the kids, right? And immediately it was a natural thing. Like Adam, like everybody jump in the email of like, yes, this is a good idea. Adam was like, yeah, my daughter can do it. So I'll ask my kids. So we kind of like, it was very organic to have that happen. But it was just that click of like, well, when you read the book, if you don't have the book yet, you got to go get it. I see somebody that just said that they got it on the mail today. So you have to write on the chat. I don't see her name anymore. Sorry, but you can write on the chat again. So it pops up to the top and you can let us know what you think. But it's really the kids' voice. They have all the power in the book. So my kids at first, they were like excited, but then nervous. And then when they went to do the session, they kind of got very shy, which it's different. Like my daughter has done voiceover for movies before, and she loves doing that. But I don't know if it's because, for a movie, you have the animation and you can kind of following what that animation is doing versus in the book, you have to really, the pages and the characters, you have to really bring your imagination fully to life. So they got pretty shy, but I guess the result was good.
Great. It's amazing.
My daughter was like, can you guys leave the room? Like, come on, please.
That's reading your book. I'm sure they wanted to do you proud.
And my little one the whole time was like, he had all 3 dogs with him. And I'm like, great, the dogs are going to start barking. This thing's going to take off. He's like moving the whole time. The chair is going. And I'm like, babe, like, just, it's okay. And then he got into it.
I'm so surprised to hear that your kids were shy because they're so good. Like they did such a good job. I remember too, like we were discussing over email who should do the audiobook. And when Camila said, let's have the kids do it, it made so much sense. It was such a good idea, right? Like, why would this book, which is from the point of view of these kids, not be narrated by the kids? My daughter Viv was thrilled. She is she's a writer herself. She's an actor herself. Recording studios are like her favorite place to be. I think it's where she feels sort of the most professional and the most grown. And she doesn't get to be there that often, but she's been in a few recording sessions, a few professional recording studios. She and I did an episode of This American Life together, talking about her rap career and my overbearing fatherhood and where the rubber met the road with that. So she was really into it, right away. And
can you share with everybody her age again? So everybody's like,
yeah, she's 13, and so we had a 13-year-old, and your kids who did the book are
when he was either 8 or just turned 9 and 12.
Yeah. Right. So we have a nice range, kind of like the kids in the book.
Absolutely.
And although I gotta say, the asterisk to all of this wonderfulness around the audiobook, I do have a bit of an issue, which is that my 5-year-old is super mad that she is not part of the book.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Next book.
And the thing is, she can't read, but she's memorized the entire book. So like I tried to be like, yeah, Xanthi, I know, but you got to be able to read. And she was like, watch this. And literally just read the entire book front to back. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh my gosh. That's too much.
Yeah.
See, my oldest Adam my oldest, got a little bit, he got sentimental about it too. And I was like, well, buddy, like you're 13, like you're getting older, like, you don't, he's more like outdoorsy kind of, young man. I was like, and Livingston, he's 8. And he's like, yeah, okay, I get it, I guess. But he had a little bit of a sour little spot for it too.
Oh, we needed 6 narrators.
Yeah. I gotta say also that I was listening in the session, and the director was so good with the kids. Viv had such a good time with her. They stayed in touch. They're like trading emails now. Viv listened to, it's been really,
awesome.
really, really sweet. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay, so I know that healthy eating has been a really big passion of yours, Camila. And I would love to hear just a little bit, maybe some inside family stories about healthy eating disasters or successes that sort of either made their way into the book or were an inspiration for the book.
Kind of in there, whether on purpose or not.
Yes.
Well, look, I'm all for, a lot of people say, hey, you're all about healthy eating. And for me, it's more like, I'm more about better for you. So I'm a big believer that if you can look at how you do things, right? And how you do things in your life, whether it's food, your day-to-day routine, whatever you do, and you go, how can I do a little bit better? How can I do a little bit more better? And if you do a little bit better, then all of a sudden you look back and you're like, oh, I'm starting to feel better. I'm starting to get, my routine. Then you start feeling good. You get a groove on, and then you go, ooh, how can I get a little better, right? And it's kind of like the different stages of the evolution of it, right? Like I still have a lot of work to do. I'm getting to the next stage of getting better from where I am, right? So I think that if you do that so it's small changes that you can continue doing for a long period of time that you can sustain, that eventually going to bring the long-term changes in your life versus the fads that you do. I'm going to go follow this one all the way, but then you can't sustain. So you did it for a month and then you're out of it, right? Like it doesn't really, then it's a yo-yo on everything, emotionally, physically, on everything in your life. So that's kind of my philosophy in it. We're not perfect in our household. I always joke, we try to do better for us majority of the time. And then we have our free for all times. I've been guilty of being, honestly, I know this is a strong word, but it's true because sugar creates an addiction. And I was addicted to chocolate. Like if anybody on the chat here had this problem too, let us know. So I don't feel so alone on this situation. But I used to wake up and eat chocolate. I used to have chocolate right before I went to bed, like the last thing, like my drawer next to my bed. And once the kids got older enough, I started to hide I had a stash.
I think we've all been there.
Right? I had my stash. And I thought I was so sly with it. I'm like, nobody knows what it is. Like I'm fully getting away. And I have my little stuffing still on the side and nobody knows what it is. So I'm like, okay, kids went to bed, whatever. Putting my little stuff going. And as I'm reaching to my stash and grabbing it down, they all walk in the pantry like, what are you doing? We got you. They're like, you're telling us, you're teaching all this stuff, but you're not doing it. And I was like, busted, full on busted, full on. And they actually inspired me to do better in that sense. So right now, I'm not I've worked really hard on my sugar situation, which is 1,000 times better for real. And the chocolate now, I still have my chocolate, but instead of the milk chocolate, I found a vegan chocolate with hazelnut inside. So good. And that still gives my my treat, but I kind of I don't have it every day, but when I need it, it's there, it's better for me, it's good, and the kids see that, and it also makes them want to do better too, right? They're like, okay, she's doing it, I gotta step up my game too. So it becomes a thing in the household. I was talking earlier today, which is so interesting. Sorry, I got Norma here. She said, yes, I have chocolate every night. I love any chocolate. Oh, she's asked me to speak in Portuguese. Sorry, I can't speak in Portuguese. Mais beijos, beijos. Pra você também. But I grew up I come from a family of farmers. My dad and I still have a farm together, and to today he's still a farmer in Brazil. And the relationship between seed to table, it's been always very strong. Like, it's very clear. But we never had the conversation about sugar, which, looking back, it's so crazy to me that I could have as much sugar as I wanted. And it is what I struggle with today still. It's sugar. So the book, guys, start that conversation early.
Adam, what about your household? Have you had any tips and tricks to share? Successes, horrible failures?
I mean, any number of failures, a daily operation around here for sure. But I think what we've done pretty successfully has been to just try to make sure that the kids try everything, and that from a really, really young age, like from birth, the palate is always being kind of expanded, because I mean, Camila talks about sugar, and I think the thing about sugar is it's so intense that sweetness gives you such a dopamine rush that, like, it can burn out a kid's palate. If a kid gets accustomed to that extreme sweetness, not the sweetness of like a piece of fruit, but the sweetness of like, high fructose corn syrup in candy, they kind of can't taste anything else. It like burns out their palate in a way. So, I try in the household to not be very restrictive. I try not to make anything taboo or bad. And in the book also, there's a real emphasis not on categorizing foods as good or bad, but on discussing instead sort of moderation and variety, and that's been my approach as well in the family. Like, at a young age, I mean, until my oldest daughter was like 6, we didn't really give her refined sugar. And we're pretty much doing the same thing with the younger ones as well. And the result is that these kids, when they now have the freedom to try something extremely sweet, they go to a birthday party and somebody gives them a cupcake or gives them like some piece of candy, they're basically like, nah, this is too sweet for me. And they're like, they're not interested. It lacks the subtlety that they've been encouraged to develop in terms of their taste buds. And, I think that's kind of a good recipe going forward, right? Like, I mean, I often think that as human beings, the most successful thing we've ever done is like learn how to cook and eat. Like, we know more about food on this planet than we do about anything else, right? We use 15% of our brains. There's a world of like science and technology that's still completely foreign to us, that we haven't figured out, that we won't be able to figure out for thousands of years. But I feel like 95% of what's delicious on this planet, we have figured out that it's delicious, So like, I think for me, what's important is really just having a lot of joy around that, trying to prevent food from ever feeling like a problem or a burden or something that you can't figure out, and giving the kids like the tools, the building blocks of understanding nutrition so that they can just make good choices, which, can be a challenge in itself. My oldest daughter, I have 3 daughters, like a farmer and a joke. My oldest daughter is vegetarian. So the challenge is always like, okay, well, how do we get enough protein? Especially when you're vegetarian, but you also don't want to eat nuts. Eggs make you feel weird. It's like, all right, you're making this lane real narrow here. So like, what can we do? But rather than being super prescriptive and being like, eat this and then eat this, being like, look, here are your options. Here is the array of foods at your disposal. Now go forth and figure it out, because I'm busy.
See, I have had to get very creative with tricks with the kids on different stages. And if you're watching and you guys got 3 kids, you got, between all of us here, we all know you got to get creative with how to get them to eat different things. My little one went through a stage where he will only eat black beans, and that was it. Like, it didn't matter what we did. And I mean, literally, I was like, I gotta call the doctor. Like, this is going long enough. Like, this kid is not going to get enough nutrition. Like, what do I do? Like, and sure enough, the next pediatrician visit we had, I was like, I need help. I'm like, I don't know what's going on with this kid. And, and he's like, he's going to be fine. I'm like, yeah, no. So I started to immediately went to how the plate in Brazil, it's very colorful, the plate in Brazil. So it's like, you know what, let me play with colors with him. So I started to, okay, you get your beans, but I'm going to have, 5 more colors, and you got to choose 3 out of 5. And you got to, and we started to slowly kind of got in there where he's like, oh, and I remember like yesterday, the first time he grabbed the red bell pepper and he chewed it. I'm looking at my husband going, don't say a word, don't look, do not look. Quiet, just let it be. And now the kid is more adventurous than my own, so, and then like, they all like take turns, right? My daughter is going through this stage, very picky stage now, age 12, sorry. And she's turned vegetarian as well. She's like, but she's very, she goes, I can't stand spinach. Like, I can't have spinach. And we made a rule that my mother-in-law, Kay, actually used to do with Matthew and her kids, which is pick a throw up vegetable. So, the vegetable that will make you like want to throw up. So she say, that one, my spinach. Okay, so the rule is if you pick one, then whenever we cook that vegetable, you don't have to have it. Everybody else in the house have to eat it, but you don't. But every other vegetable that is in the plate, everything else forget vegetables, everything else that's in the plate, you have to have a little bit of it. So that's been working out really good for my daughter. And we had one of those light bulb moments just not long ago, because this happened to me of something that I really couldn't eat it, really couldn't stand it. And then I ate it and I was like, cooked a different way. And I was like, oh, so I did this with my daughter the other day. I was cooking some pasta and I did the spinach really, really fine. And I just, put it in the pan with the garlic like really fast. I barely cooked it. And I put it on the plate and I presented very humbly. I was like, okay, babe, like, this is, I didn't have time, it's in a rush. It really doesn't taste good. Just work with me. Just work with me, babe. It's what we got. Just, go with it. Okay. She's like, okay, suspicious. And she sat and she ate the whole thing. She's like, this is so good. What do you mean this is not good? This is delicious. Da, 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 da. And I was like, that spinach in there, right? And she was like, oh. And I had that light bulb moment with her. And that happened to me of going, hey, babe, it's not that you don't like spinach. You just haven't had spinach cooked in a way that you like it. Right. So, hey, you see the way that we did this, you liked it, you ate all of it. But the really sauteed with garlic and onions, that one, you don't like it. So we had a little breakthrough. Let's see how long it lasts.
That's so smart. I love the term throw up vegetable. I'm going to absolutely steal that.
It's funny. I had a moment like that pretty recently as well, but with my mother, who was convinced that she did not like Brussels sprouts. Now, the reason she thinks she doesn't like Brussels sprouts, as you say, is she's never had them cooked properly. Because my father has been vegan for 40 years, right? So I grew up in Boston, which in the 80s was not really like a vegan paradise. You know what I mean? I was the only one in the family who would go with my father. He'd get so excited, like a new vegan restaurant would open up and he'd be like, Adam, we got to check it out, and always have some, like, Sammy's macrobiotic kitchen. And you're like, oh yeah, this sounds delicious, and we go and it would usually be terrible. Like I remember this one time I ordered a tiramisu as a dessert at a vegan restaurant. I was like, love tiramisu. This is going to be, and they brought me this thing and it was like, I don't know what was in there. It was like spackle, wood chips. And I took one bite and I was like, and the waiter came and he looked at the dessert with the one bite taken out. He looked at me and he was just like, I am so sorry. So, my mother grew up eating Brussels sprouts as prepared by my father. What did he do? The same thing he did with every vegetable. Get the biggest pot you could find, like a pot that you could, probably cook a turkey in if you wanted to. Don't do that, by the way. Don't cook your turkey that way, unless that pot is filled with like peanut oil. But he would just, throw a million vegetables in and then like fill it with water and, couple dashes of like curry powder, and then cook it for 17 hours. So like it was terrible. And of course she didn't think Brussels sprouts were good. And I was like, just try my Brussels sprouts. You know, I'm gonna parboil them, and then I'm gonna saute them with the olive oil and the garlic. I'm gonna do this little gremolata thing. Boom. And she was like, you know, you could just see the revelation happening. And I was watching my kids watch her.
There we go.
You know, they pick up bad habits wherever they see them. So when their grandmother's like, they're like, oh, you can say that. You can just refuse food. I was like, you know, so I felt good about that.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That's amazing. Yes, Brussels sprouts cooked the right way are amazing. The best.
Yes.
Yay.
You make me hungry, guys.
But yes, that was a really great point about balance too, Adam, because I know that was really important to both of you, that we end with donut holes, and that it's not about only eating vegetables. It's just about finding the right balance and trying things.
Yes, trying things. And if you have a variety, and if you know, again, empowering your kids, eventually they're going to start doing the right decisions on their own. Like Adam was sharing about his kids, and it's just a balance. You can still have your ice cream and your donut holes, just not for breakfast, just, not every day, just more now and then, right?
Right. Of course, in the book, we also have parents who apparently like drink industrial waste.
Yes.
So, we took it over the top a little bit.
That was a great conversation though, like in my household, like with my 8-year-old, well, he's now 9. When I read for him, he was 8. When I read him for the first time, the first draft, and it was a great conversation about the industrial waste, because it was like, well, what is that? And how do we, he hasn't been used that way. And then we got talking about it. So it was actually an interesting page that we stayed on for a good amount of time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Camila, I think I always enjoy listening to you talk about kind of food literacy, right? And like reading the labels, and it's obvious, but also people don't do it. And it's so important to actually, I go through this with my oldest kid now, because I will send her shopping. And she's, she has the attention span of like a mosquito because she's 13. So like, I'll be like, no, get the organic can of corn for the salad we're going to make or whatever. And she'll I'll be elsewhere in the store and she'll be like, okay, here it is. I'll be like, yo, turn it around, read the ingredients. What's in here? Can you pronounce everything in here? Do you have any idea what that ingredient even is? If not, it's probably not the right can of corn, Viv. Go back to
go back. It's very true. I'm going to steal that line. Food literacy. I can't even say it now.
You've had a busy day.
Yes, we did have it. Yes, I had a busy day.
But, 4 in the morning.
I got an excuse, but it's still, I'm good with my accent. But I'm going to steal that because it's so true. And again, the more you teach your kids that, because the kids go right to the front, right? Like that's what the marketers want. Everybody wants. I mean, we don't need to get so deep into this because I'll get very deep in it. So pull me out of it, okay?
Yeah, I love it.
But my kids would be like, my kids, the first time they ever did that was with Gatorade, sports drinks. It was just with sports drinks because their friends shop with the whole gallon thing and the sports, the soccer game and stuff, and they're like, we want that too. And I was like, sure, man, you can have a cup, you can have some. If you want a small one of the little bottles, you can have a little bit here and there, but we're not coming in with the gallon. They're like, why? There's the whole thing back and forth. And I was like, well, the same thing. Look in the back, right? And they went, oh, red 40, yellow 5. That sounds cool. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds really cool, doesn't it? And I'm like, what is it? Do you know what it is? And I made a game, and it became a competition in the house of who found out first who it was, what it did to your body, how it was made, and that kind of stuff. And it became a dinner conversation. And I gave a treat at the end or whatever. But now, my daughter, my daughter loves pickles, and she caught it before I caught it. Somehow it was a jar in the house. It was and she looked in the back and it's got a yellow 5. And she's like, throw this away. Why? She's like, why would you put yellow 5 on the pickles? She gets, passionate about it, Yeah, it's fun. I'm gonna steal that, Adam. That's a really good way to put it.
Take it. Yeah.
Well, I know that Camilla, you have been out and about quite a bit today, and I know you kind of started hearing some feedback about what responses you've been getting. What have been some of the really meaningful stories you've started hearing or responses you've been getting?
Honestly, overall, everybody that I've met that has had the book in their hands has just fell in love with the book. They all go, this is such an important conversation, and you guys have put it together in such a fun, delightful way that it's just fun. It's funny, and they just really, really love it. They love everything about the book. It was not one person that was like, yeah. No, everybody was like super excited, super excited. Even people that didn't have, I did a good amount of interviews today, and some people, that were doing the interviews, they didn't have kids, but they're like, I'm buying for my cousin. I'm buying for my neighbor's kid. I'm going to donate to the school. I'm going to donate to this organization, because they're like, it's such an important topic overall to talk about it. And it's one of the books that really, if people take the time to get it and have it in their hands, you can understand how just joyful it is with a very important mission.
Great. Yeah, I love that it makes you laugh, but it also makes you think. That's what I fell in love with.
It's very
the book
true.
Too, for sure.
Yeah.
And Adam, you have done a lot of books, but this has been your first picture book. Has there been anything during this process that's felt really different or surprised you?
Well, I mean, typically in the past for me, when I've written rhyming books, they have a lot of curse words in them.
Right.
It's a lot easier to explain to somebody that you've written a children's book than explain to them that you've written a children's book that by no means you should read to a child. It gets complicated. It's kind of a joy just to be like, no, it's a children's book for children. Read it to your children. I dropped a copy off at my middle kid, my 5-year-old's preschool last week when I got my author copies. And every day, pretty much when I pick her up, it's a co-op. So the parents are in the classroom every day, different parents each day. Pretty much every day, whoever the parent on site has been like, these kids made me read your book 5 times. They were laughing. They're quoting it. Like they have, this kid over here has it memorized. So, it's a very small sample size, and granted a biased population, maybe they may be inclined to like it. I'm sure that Xanthi is like, that's my father's book. It's dedicated to me. Nonetheless, I feel very good about it. I really, I had so much fun with this project. Like it's just been a joy from beginning to end. It's always fun to try to write something to make kids laugh. Like there's sort of no purer kind of writing than that. Then like, okay, how do we convey the meaning? How do we get across all the points we want? But how do we also like make it funny and make it something that kids are going to want to read aloud and have read to them repeatedly, to the point where their parents are going to be like, oh my God, I never want to read this book again. How do we get the parents to actually want to read the book again? How do you balance it so that there's something for the kids and the parents? Like, how do you do something that kind of hits all those markers? It was a fun, really fun challenge.
It's interesting though, Adam, because I have had people, you sharing your experience with that, I had people saying that their kids have read multiple times too. The people that got the books ahead of time. So it's not just in your corner of the woods.
Good.
It's across the board.
Yeah.
Same for me. And I feel like kids are brutally honest. So,
yeah,
I think we can take it.
Yes. They will let us know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. I'm just looking at some of these comments here. From Betty Bader, Brussels sprouts and spinach are both amazing. Love them. Agreed. And there's a question here for Camilla. What was your favorite children's book growing up?
I do. I have some, for whatever reason, it's part of my childhood memory. It's kind of a blur with all that I remember. So I don't remember all the books I read, but I have this very vivid memory of The Little Prince. And I just have this very, and I don't know, maybe kind of even that, reading that as a little girl kind of got me to think, oh yeah, I can go someplace, I can be someplace else. I can go far away.
Definitely.
In a way, growing up in Brazil. And I just like 2 weeks ago, actually, we have a section, or we have a lot of books in the house, like a lot of books for the kids. And we kind of rotate with friends and donations, and then friends give it to us. We have a whole thing going. And we have this section where we have all the kids' books, and we sat there. My little one wanted a new book to read. And we sat there and we went through, the books, and we picked that one out that actually a friend had given, that you open up and it has the things pop up. It's
nice.
It's really pretty. And we actually just picked up that again. And I was like, do you want me to go read it for you? I was all excited. I was like, do you want me to go read it for you? We'll go lay down and read it together. And he was like, no, I'm okay. I want to read it by myself. And I was like, heartbroken. But at the same time,
Right.
I'm like, cool, go ahead. You got this.
Yeah.
Slow reading.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, yeah. I miss it's funny. I mean, parenthood is all about paradox, right? Like I both totally miss reading to my oldest daughter, and like am constantly trying to get out of reading to my younger children.
Oh, it's very true. Very true. We do reading time in the house. So we kind of push them to do independently, which is really nice. But then now I'm like, my little one just doesn't want me to read for him anymore. He's like, I'm done. I'm cool. I really want to go sit in my little corner and just have that quiet time with myself. And I was like, that's cool, but can we just snuggle for something? Give me something.
Can I just hug your legs while you do it? Yeah.
I'm going to be a man in a second. I need to soak this in a little bit more.
That's right. Yeah. No, when they stop wanting you to read to them, you really do lose a certain kind of cuddle time, intimacy. It's so, it's so sweet to have a kid like sit on you or lie on top of you and listen to a book. And they're not going to do it if there's no book. So, yeah.
It's very true.
It's the perfect way to cuddle up, for sure.
It's very true. Is there any more questions that we have here? Let's see.
Janet Taylor says she ordered a book and doesn't have any kids. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you for the support.
It's all ages.
Yes. Plus, you can donate. You can read it. You can have fun with it because you will enjoy it, reading it. And then you can donate. No, I think it was it Yvonne? Oh, Yvonne ordered for her grandkids.
Nice.
They only eat chicken nuggets. That's why I ordered the book.
We hope it helps. You can report back, please.
Yes.
Oh, and another person who has chocolate every night. Yes.
Yeah. Guys, if you have any questions for me, Adam, Kate does an amazing work. I mean, I don't think this would have come to life, right, Adam?
That's right.
Oh, you guys, you two did it all.
It's true. It's true. You believed in it from the beginning.
I fell in love with it from the first time I read it. How could I not? It very much hit home. This is my life, pretty much. Exactly.
Wait, Kate, tell everybody how old your kids are.
My kids, my youngest will be 3 next month, and then I also have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old. So. Yeah, we're in the thick of it.
I was just gonna say, I have so much respect for you. You have no idea. They had no idea.
Give me your words of wisdom for the next few years.
I don't have many. Just stick through it. Just power through it. That's it. We do have somebody. Yes. Is it Kaylee Draper? I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. Is asking, would it be available in Australia?
I think it will be. Yes, I think they'll be selling this version over in Australia. It should be available. Yeah. And I did have a few questions pop up here. We have one of how to realistically get your kids to have a wide palate. Did you ever have your children help at mealtime? I think that's such a key foundation for the kids. And I tell you, I'll share what I did. It doesn't mean that's better or worse or right or wrong. But for me in my household, when we were starting the cooking process, and I don't know if it's just being from Brazil and having, again, a outside perspective coming in.
just like Adam, you and I were talking about, if somebody looks into the Brazil from an outside perspective, they're going to have another perspective. They go, really, they're doing that? That's, that's weird. But so like, I've when my kids were little, I see a lot of, the whole push for kids and parents to bake together. So there's a lot of baking, like all the videos, all the things, the products was all like baking. And I'm like, well, if my kids' first experience that they're going to highly remember of us together in the kitchen is making treats, then what is that setting up in their mind, right? In terms of habits. So the first thing that I did with my child, with my little one, with Levi, when he was little, was I got one of those electric pans, so it plugs in, I'll plug in, but they can control the button. So they felt like, okay, they can't really burn themselves in the fire. They only burn themselves, they put their hands inside, right? You got to be right there and watch it. But, and the first thing we ever did in the kitchen was cook breakfast. So he made eggs, and then he, I helped him with the avocados, and then he got the fruit, and he chopped up the fruit and the toast, and all of a sudden he's sitting there and he goes, wow, like I made this. So then he started to getting up and wanting to do it more often and having that pride. And then he wants to cook for the grandma when she comes to visit. Then he wants to do it for us on a Sunday morning. And it really, I feel like the idea of involving your kids in cooking in the kitchen. Yes, it gets more messy. Yes, it does. Yes, it takes a bit longer sometimes. Yes, it's hard to have patience when you don't have time. But, pick your battles, pick and choose when to do it. But really having that cooking time together, what they really start to understand, oh, if I do this and I put that, it's just, again, those little light bulbs that we were talking about earlier, they start to get really involved and they take a lot of pride. And what happens when somebody has pride? They want to do more of it because it feels good, right? Yeah. Like they like it. So I think that's a very, very important point.
Yeah. Eggs were my son's starter food too. I feel like it's just one of those, like, it's fun to crack. And then he would start, instead of crackers for a snack, he would start wanting to make scrambled eggs. It is. It's a great lead-in. Where did your kids start, Adam? Are they big chefs?
Yeah. My 13-year-old really likes to cook a lot. Like, she'll cook dinner for the family once, twice a week sometimes. Yeah, it's interesting because she doesn't want any advice. She hates when I backseat cook,
Oh, like, that's the worst. Don't do that.
I know, but it's like I gotta eat it, and I want to be like,
No, you can't do that. You know why?
I know. I gotta be better.
I'm gonna tell you why. Because that's why I did not learn to cook early on. Because my mom used to do that.
Yeah.
Like all the time. And then if I would start cooking, Adam, she would jump in and like take over the cooking. And I'll be like, well, this is not fun anymore. And I did not learn to cook until older. So please don't do that.
Right.
Let go.
I'll bite my tongue. Yeah, she hates, because I don't take over, but I'll sort of like pass by, take a peek, be like, you should probably turn the heat down. And she'll be like, no. She'll like turn it up. I'm like, oh, here we go. So yeah, I need to pick my battles a little better. But the good news is she really does like to cook. And, I didn't learn to cook until I was much older. Like, I learned to cook in my 20s. I was one of those dudes who, when they were, 20, 21, I could cook like 2 things. If you went on a third date with me, you were getting the same meal I made you on the first date. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't really get good until my early 20s. I remember like a friend of mine and I in Brooklyn in the early 2000s, we started splitting a CSA box. So it was back when they would just bring you a box. You had no control over it. So you'd be like, be like December, and you'd be like, cool, we got 2 apples. Here's your apple. Here's my apple. And then we got like 17 bunches of collard greens. And we'd be like, I guess we better figure out how to cook these collard greens or we're going to starve, So we together started really looking up recipes. And this is somebody I grew up with whose mother was actually a chef. So, he had it in his DNA. Although when we were kids, we'd always be like walking home from school together. It's always the same conversation when you're like walking home from school. You're like, yo, what do you have to eat at your house? What do you have to eat at your house? This is my friend Eugene, his family is Korean, right? And so I'd be like, so what do you have at your house? He'd be like, some leftover duck and some soup, and my mom made like some eel sushi last night. What do you have at your house? And I'd be like, you know, man, frozen French fries. And he'd be like, let's go to your house. But yeah, I think what's cool to me is watching my daughter, and even the little kids too, my younger daughters, learn the building blocks of cooking. Like, it's one thing to be able to follow a recipe. It's another thing to have a kind of intuitive understanding of how flavor works and how the science of cooking works, and like why you do the things you do, so that you can like look at a recipe, be like, okay, I understand the basic structure here. I know I'm supposed to start, with my, my carrots and my onion and my garlic and my celery, and like, get my sofrito going. Like, if you don't sort of understand those things, you're always going to just be kind of guessing and intimidated, and like things are going to go wrong because you didn't sort of have a, it's like trying to build a house, but you can only like look one brick at a time, versus being able to step back and sort of having an understanding of how it should look, and then like proceeding with that. So I'm very, it makes me happy, even though my daughter rejects my advice all the time, that she sort of understands it on that holistic level, like how recipes work, what the science kind of is. Like, that's cool to me, because I didn't know that until I was 25.
That's awesome.
It's a big win.
Yeah.
So Casey in Oklahoma, this is kind of on the note of what you're talking about, Adam. Casey in Oklahoma wants to know what both of your go-to family meals are on a busy night.
Okay, for me, on a busy night, I just go for the good old bolognese, pasta bolognese. Even though now my daughter is vegetarian, so it's getting a little tricky. The whole family is kind of slowly transitioning to vegetarian with her. Yeah, it's kind of been good, actually. So that we have a recipe. We have it on Women of Today website, actually. It's a recipe that uses mushrooms instead of meat. And that's been a good transition for us. But that's like, easy, go, boom, 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 do it. Or tacos. I always have beans in my freezer. So if you guys like beans, that's like the easiest thing, guys. You cook ahead of time, you leave it a batch in the freezer. You don't have time to defrost it. Avocados, cilantro, tomatoes, onions, little lime on top. That's a meal right there, right? Or lentils. Mm-hmm. So those are kind of like, and my other two kids, their favorite, even my daughter, again, before she turned into vegetarian, their favorite thing that I used to cook for them is this honey chicken that I make. And they will also run around in the house going, honey chicken, and they'll go crazy.
It's fun to say.
They'll compete who eats the most. Like, it's really cute.
That sounds great. What about your family, Adam?
A lot of my go-tos are pasta, are sort of like fish or seafood based. I think in a past life I was like an unsuccessful Sicilian fisherman, because a lot of the dishes I like to make are basically Sicilian pasta dishes that are based on like when there was no catch that day, so all you have in your nets is like anchovies or sardines. There's a Sicilian sardine pasta that I make a lot, that's basically, it's like fennel, onions, saffron, red, white wine, raisins, if your household can agree on the mixing of sweet and savory, which mine cannot at this point. Sardines. It's pretty simple, but it comes together fast. But it's like, it's got the pasta, it's got the onions and the fennel seed, it's got the sardines, it's got the saffron, it's kind of hearty and satisfying, and like, it's kind of all you need. You might do a little salad with it, but like, everybody's kind of good.
That's good.
You're impressive on a busy night. That sounds complicated.
Well, I work from home.
Okay, so we have a question from Jess in Florida. What's the main point you want your readers to take away from this book? So you covered that some, but
yeah, we covered that a lot. But the main point, if we had to pick one, what would be yours, Adam?
I think to look at food as an adventure, like to treat it, yeah, to treat it as an adventure, and not a burden, you know.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I
That's a
can
good
probably
one.
do better than that.
That's a good one.
Camilla's gonna do better than me on that.
No. That's a great one. I was thinking, which it falls a little bit into what you said, that, it's no need for guilt. It can be fun learning,
Hmm.
like we always, as parents, and it's such a guilt thing around food, and how do you do, even as adults, it's like, a guilt thing around food, and it is a thing, right? And food should be fun. Like, food should genuinely be fun and exciting. And even if you don't like things, that should still be fun, right? You should still, like, so that whole journey, I think that, the main point for me is that, and it's a joyful thing. And I think the book brings that joy into, with the characters. If you see their faces, if you see their expressions, and how they're getting on their parents and all of that, like, it's joyful. And and I feel like that's how food should be.
That's a really
Yeah.
great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think especially with the first child, there is just so much stress and guilt involved of doing
goodness,
everything.
yeah.
I know it's definitely, it should be something fun.
Yes,
Yeah.
That's a
absolutely.
great point. And then I have a question for Adam of what inspired you to start in the first place writing funny books?
It's funny. I mean, before I wrote like funny books, before I wrote like the Go the F to Sleep books or the humor books that I've written with Dave Barry and Alan Zweibel, I was a novelist. And I tackled fairly serious subject matter in those books, but I always tried to leaven it with humor. I'm somebody who fundamentally views writing and the production of fiction as something that ought to be important in the world. Like, to take the time to write a book, you better have something to say. So my books have always been like political. They've been dealing with what I consider to be important issues, but I've also always felt that to get people to the table, humor, laughter, absurdity, satire, these things can open up conversations in ways that a more serious approach just won't. A lot of people are shut down around a lot of issues, whether it's something simple like food or something much more thorny and complex like, race, identity, class, but regardless of what the issue is, if you can get people to laugh, to recognize themselves, if you can find an unexpected way in and disarm people, then you're going to get a lot further. So I think I've always seen humor as sort of strategically important to all of the work that I do. Also, it's just my worldview. Like, even in the most serious of circumstances, I'm always sort of seeing the funny angle. I'm always cracking the joke or restraining myself from cracking the joke. But it's just part and parcel of how I see the world, is like through the lens of what's funny, My co-writer Alan Zweibel, who is kind of a comedy legend, was on Saturday Night Live as a writer for the first 6 years, and created Curb Your Enthusiasm and a whole bunch of other shows. He told me a story once that to me kind of sums up everything about humor. And Alan used to work out of the Friars Club in New York, where all these old comedians hung out and worked. And he said one day he was leaving the Friars Club, and right in front of him, leaving, was Henny Youngman, right? Legendary king of the one-liners. Henny Youngman thought he was alone, did not know Alan was behind him. He walks out of the club, and there's a pigeon on the sidewalk. And Henny Youngman bends down and says to the pigeon, "Any mail for me?" To me, that's everything, right? Because it's like Henny Youngman is talking, he's telling the joke to a bird. It doesn't matter if anybody's there to hear it. He thought of it, it entered his head, he thought it was funny, he told the joke. If you don't tell the joke, the jokes behind it might get bottled up and trapped, like it's a way of seeing the world. It's a way of processing everything from joy to pain. So like when you have the joke, you tell the joke, and then you just kind of like, it's how you process. I don't know. I love that story.
That's a great story. That's a great story.
More than Alan has at this point.
A good reminder. Yeah, I think that's so true. The humor was really what first drew me to this book too. I think humor gets sort of underplayed. I think people think that the very serious books are maybe the more important ones. But I think that humor, like you said, can just be such a fantastic way in. I think you both, it's been such a joy to work on this book because you're both so funny and so smart and have just thought about every single aspect of this story and making it as great as it can. Mike was just like such an amazing asset to this story too. It has been such a pleasure.
No, it's been our pleasure. I don't want to speak for you, Adam, but I'm already speaking for you.
No, it's been a total pleasure.